Welcome to the podcast. And I'm here with April Babcock, and she's going to tell a little bit of her story about the loss of her son and how it's affected her and kind of where her journey's at now. So, April, thank you for joining, and I'll let you kind of give a background to your story.
Thank you so much, Rick. So, I lost my son. He was 25 years old when my son passed away, January 26, 2019. So, coming up on 6.5 years. My son died to illicit fentanyl poisoning. Oh, God.
Talk about fentanyl poisoning because as I told you, I really didn't understand that taking fentanyl might look like something completely different. You don't really know what
Well,
you're taking.
yeah, absolutely. So, illicit fentanyl is the leading cause of death in Americans 18 to 45, and I believe the number is actually going up and lowering because we're losing 22 high school students every week in America. All powders and all pills. Pills are either fake, there's really no real pills out on the streets, they're all fake. So, which means Adderall, Xanax, Percocet, you name it, they're all fake pills. And you can't tell the difference between a real Adderall or Percocet compared to a fake pill. The DEA, it was 7 out of every 10 pills had a lethal dose of illicit fentanyl. I got to get new update from the DEA because there was a time I think it went down to 5 out of every 10. Then I saw somebody sharing the other day it's still 7 out of every 10. So the bottom line is 5 out of 10, 7 out of 10, they're lethal pills. And then when it comes to cocaine and heroin and meth, all of that has fentanyl in it, and now xylazine and other crazy synthetics that are even more lethal than illicit fentanyl. And when you think illicit fentanyl, it only takes 2 milligrams to kill someone. That's equivalent to 2 grains of salt. So if you take a sweet and low packet, if that was illicit fentanyl, that one sweet and low packet has the potential to kill 500 people. Pure insanity. I'm not saying it's a good choice to take illicit drugs. Obviously, that's a bad choice, but people should learn from mistakes, especially our children and our youth. They should learn from mistakes. Now, they die. They die from one mistake. Before illicit fentanyl, we always had people die, and they were usually people that suffered with a legit substance use disorder. Now it's first time experimental and occasional users, and now babies that are dying. And those people never died before. It was always people that suffered with an SUD. And before illicit fentanyl, even people with an SUD, they had umpteen chances of recovery. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the stories. Their kid went to rehab 7, 8, 9, 10 times, sometimes even more than that. And they had all those chances to recover. But, my son he never even got that chance to recover. The last 2 years of his life, I knew he was suffering with a substance use disorder. We talked about it. He just wasn't ready to, take those steps. His drug of choice was cocaine, and the cocaine, that's what killed him, actually. But it wasn't the cocaine that killed him, it was the illicit fentanyl that was in his cocaine. Even the police said my son was given a hot shot. The dealer that sold my son that cocaine, that my son thought it was cocaine, he knew probably my son was going to die. And he didn't care. It's like money trumps human lives. And, you know, I have this group, Lost Voice of Fentanyl, and we really focus on supply. So we focus on the borders, especially under the last administration when they were wide open and the fentanyl was just pouring in here. Absolute insanity. And we focus on China. China's the head of the snake. So if your viewers don't know, the illicit fentanyl starts in pharmaceutical labs in China. Last year, last April, I went to the China Select Committee had a hearing in Washington, D.C., and they pretty much told us what us parents with dead children that do our research, we already knew. But China is deliberately killing us. They give tax breaks, incentives to all these pharmaceutical labs in China that are making these precursor chemicals. They ship it to the cartels produce it and flood it into our country. It's a major issue. I'm considering it's a leading cause of death, 18 to 45-year-olds. I would say that's a national security crisis and a threat to our country. I was telling you earlier before we started recording that just last week there was some concert in Colorado, and they had, I think it was like a 3-day, big concert event, and they had to close the event because apparently someone was putting illicit fentanyl in some water bottles. I got to read up a little bit more about that story, but this is why, we're fighting so hard for illicit fentanyl to be labeled a weapon of mass destruction, because when it only takes 2 grains of salt, 2 milligrams to kill someone, I've met hundreds. Actually, I know thousands of parents with dead kids to illicit fentanyl, but some of these kids took half a pill or they split a pill with the friend. Some of them, both kids died. I know so many people. My friend down the street, she's another Maryland mom. Her son and his girlfriend both died together. But this is a very common story. And that's when it just boggles my mind, because I'm like, how in the world is this so common when it's definitely not normal? You should know about illicit fentanyl before you met me. It needs to be a household name, because it takes one try of anything and now you could potentially die. It's Russian roulette. And then there's people that, oh, I would never do that. You know how many moms that, I've talked to, and they always said, not my child, and then their child's dead. Yeah. I try to use an example. A lot of people don't do illicit drugs, but, they'll go out to a bar and they'll drink. Have you ever heard a good story come from anybody inebriated? Not really. And people make bad decisions when they're inebriated. It takes one friend to convince them to take this pill. Oh, we're all going back to my house later on. I got an 8-ball. The Kansas City Chiefs last year when they were in the playoffs. Remember that story? 3 people died together. They were watching the Kansas City Chiefs. A friend invited 3 of his friends over. They were all in their 20s or 30s. I don't remember. They all got a bunch of cocaine. 3 of them died. That is not normal. Like, again, I'm not saying it's a good choice. I did cocaine for 20 years of my life. I'm here today living and breathing. I always say if illicit fentanyl was out back in the day, it would be me and all my friends dead and not my son and all his friends. 18 months after my son passed away, his best friend died from a Xanax. Because it wasn't a Xanax. It was a fake Xanax made to look like a real pharmaceutical grade pill. And it just wasn't.
Tell me a little bit about your journey and I know from seeing your website and your organization, I mean, you're making an incredible impact on making people aware of fentanyl. But from when your son passed away until you started the organization, can you kind of talk about your journey there? Like, were you really aware as much of the fentanyl when your son passed away? I know it's become a life passion and you've kind of learned to use your voice. Like, can you just talk about that journey from when you found out about his loss to kind of when you really started this organization?
Well, I'll never forget that call. Actually, I was sitting in this room when my mom called me. 5:47. We all remember the time we got the call or we found out. Most of us remember. But it was 5:47. I was sitting in this room and my mom called me and she said, "April, I'm so sorry." And I knew it. I just dropped the phone, screamed. My mom lives 2 blocks down the street, and I laid on my son's body for about 20 minutes before the police made me get off. Sometimes I'm still mad at myself. I didn't lay on him longer. I know that sounds messed up, but you can understand since you've lost your son. But I knew the day he died, it was fentanyl because I knew what my son was doing. I knew he was doing cocaine, and I knew that would have never killed him. And I had recently, it was a few months before my son died, I started hearing about illicit fentanyl and heroin, people dying from heroin with illicit fentanyl. I didn't know too much about it, but I knew the day my kid died, I knew it was fentanyl. And then when I got the toxicology report back like 4 weeks later, I was right. It was fentanyl. But I wanted to die when my son died. And, I do have two other children. But I really just, I didn't want to be here. Like, I just wanted to be with my kid. And I knew, actually, on the porch at my mom's house before they even took my son's body out of the house, you know, I told you that I had used drugs for 20 years of my life. So pretty much from the time I was like 20 to 40, I wasn't an everyday user. I never was, but I was definitely an occasional user and sometimes more than I should have, which I should have never done it, but I did. But I made a decision on the porch when my son's body was still in the house. Crime Lab was in there doing their thing, and I just made a decision on the porch. And I said, "Here I am, God, I'm all yours." Like, it's too much of a burden for any person to bear on their own. And honestly, I don't know how anybody gets through this without the Lord. I have really no idea how anybody functions without running to God. Like, I ran to God. I put it at the foot of the cross. Sometimes I had to put it at the foot of the cross 50 times a day. But I wasn't I wasn't a member of a church when my son passed away. But real quick, I started church hopping. I went to like 5 different churches before I found the one that was for me. And that's what I did. I went to church, I joined Bible studies. I even went to Israel for 2 weeks on my son's first year anniversary. Why did I go to Israel? Because it's God's chosen people. That's where Jesus ascended up to heaven. And I know my kids there, and I just wanted to be closer to that, like closer to God. So, I went to Israel, but pretty much for the first year and a half, I just prayed, cried, screamed, cried, prayed, cried. It was just, and I knew I wanted to do something. Like, I was meeting these moms on social media, and, I was, talking some about China and illicit fentanyl, but, I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my grief. But I knew I had to do something. So I just kept praying. And it took about 18 months. And I swear I heard from God. Some people say I'm crazy, but I know I'm not crazy. And I feel like I'm doing God's will for my life. And I'm doing what God put on my heart to do. And that's focusing on supply. And honestly, it's the complete opposite of what I thought I would be doing, because when I told you my son was suffering with an SUD, and like soon after he died, I just kept thinking in my mind, I'm going to open up a recovery house and call it Austen's house, like after my son. And we had a pool table here that he always played on, and I wanted to take this pool table into the recovery house. And that was like the vision in my mind, like where I was going to go. But yeah, that's not what God put on my heart to do. And it was to focus on supply, which is, there has to be people doing both. But no one, I couldn't find any groups like focusing on supply. There were all these groups that, addiction and recovery, there's thousands of them. thousands of them on social media, but I didn't see any about supply. So that's me. And, yeah, I feel I'm really doing God's will for my life.
Well, I think your story, one of the things that's unique that I listen to on some of the other things that you've got online is, we know that death of a child can come to anyone. Doesn't matter social status. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter if you're poor, you're rich. None of that matters. And I think it's inspiring when you talked about like kind of where you were at in life and what you've done with this organization. This was not something that probably you had a lot of skill sets around to
Oh,
start
none.
with. And so you might just talk about that because it's inspirational to know that, these kind of life-changing events you can take from, you can't change the event that happened, but you can certainly change kind of the dynamics and the outcome maybe for other people's lives. And it gives you a mission in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're 1,000%, we're grassroots. I'm mainly on Facebook because I just don't like social media, but we're up to 36,000 members. I wish I could do, Instagram and TikTok and all those, but I just don't. I just stick with Facebook, and we go rally every year in Washington, D.C. We have a big event this year. It's October 18th, will be my fifth year. But yeah, before my son died, like, I haven't even had a job I've had to take a shower for. I worked at a kennel, I painted bridges, now I clean houses, and I had no idea what I was doing. And sometimes I'm still learning every day. Like, I'm a nonprofit. I just learn as I go. Talk to other people that run nonprofits to try to get some help because I really learn as I go. And I tell people if I can do it, anybody can do it. I haven't even had a compute. I have not typed on a computer since I think I was maybe 19 years old. I had no reason to have a computer. I had a cell phone, but now I have a laptop, I have an Apple computer. Everything is since my son died.
Because of a
I'm
mission.
learning. Yeah, because what we're doing, we're fighting to save your kids from death. Like, I can't save my kid, he's already gone. But our mission is to save other people and to just to get the awareness out there. We're losing. Okay, there's another Maryland family. Okay, 14 and 10. Brother and sister. You know who found the 14 and 10-year-old brother and sister? Their 12-year-old sibling. Imagine being 12 and finding your 14-year-old sister and your 10-year-old little brother dead. This is the crisis. This is the crisis that no one is talking about. Nobody. We are. The families are. And if we didn't do it, I mean, things are getting a little, they're not getting better, but there's more awareness. There's more awareness out there right now. And I'm going to tell you where that awareness comes from. It's all the grassroots like me. Because no one was talking about it. This has been going on since 2013. It is 2025. It's been over a decade. We're losing over 100,000 people every single year. Okay, do you really realize how many people that are? That is like 747. How many? 250? That would be like that crashing to the ground every day in America. And it's more people than that dying every single day. If that was an airplane fell from the sky and crashed, it would be on every newscast, every channel around the world. But when it comes to illicit fentanyl, it's crickets. And I know a lot of it is the stigma, but I don't let stigma phase me. Unfortunately, it has a lot to do with the stigma because, oh, your kid made a choice type of thing, which is really sad to me. But we keep pushing forward and trying to get laws changed. I've testified the last 2 years on a death by distribution law in my state of Maryland that, for 2 years in a row now, it's been tucked away in a drawer to not even be voted upon, which I think is criminal because we have bipartisan support, Democrats, Republicans. We have so many people in support of this bill to pass, but
I thought it was interesting in one of the interviews that I watched that you did that, this could be a kid that just takes a pill to stay up late because
yeah,
they have homework. And
study.
so
How many college kids have died in their dorms because of doing exactly what you just said? And
those
I've
aren't
met
those aren't
these
drug
parents.
those kids aren't on drugs. They're not bad kids.
Exactly.
So that
No,
stigma is,
it's the stigma.
yeah.
And even those suffering with an addiction, like they were poisoned just the same. I tell people because I've come across this in the past where, there might be a mom or a dad join my group and they'll send me a private message. I don't feel like I belong here. Like my kid was actually seeking fentanyl, and we don't treat them no different. No, if they were seeking fentanyl, they were poisoned all the same. And why were they seeking fentanyl? Almost everybody that gets addicted to that, it's not by choice. It's because they thought they were getting a Percocet. They thought they were getting an Adderall. Or they thought they were doing actual heroin or cocaine. Like, if my son wouldn't have died that night, within 3 hours, he would have been feeling withdrawals. And that makes you want to go back and get more of whatever it is so you're not hurting. You get hooked on it so quick, and that's why the cartels do it, because it's cheap and it's highly addictive. So they want everybody hooked on this stuff, and it doesn't matter about the people that died. It's a money maker. Money maker.
Yeah.
So it's like they hit the jackpot when, they went into business with China to kill us.
Well, I'm thinking, we talked about my son died from a rare cancer, but during his time with the cancer, he was addicted to oxycodone, which he knew it, but luckily he was being prescribed that and got it at a pharmacy. But he could have just as easily, if he wasn't getting that prescription, could have just
And
as
it
easily had the same
happens all the
issue
time.
happen. Yeah.
The doctors cut them off from their Percocet or their Oxy. So once you're cut off and you're hooked on it, they're going to the street. And now on the street, it's all fake. They're not getting what they think they're getting. So they're being deceived to death.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a poisoning. Overdose means there's a safe dose to take. You take too much of a safe dose and it causes death or harm. There's no safe dose of illicit fentanyl. And honestly, I don't call any illicit drug death a overdose because there's no safe dose of heroin or cocaine or meth. There's zero safe dose unless it's your prescription. It says one pill every 8 hours and you take 20. That's your overdose. Or the
So
combination of certain drugs. Like my girlfriend actually overdosed. She overdosed on Benadryl, over the counter cold medicine, and she had a prescription for a mild tranquilizer. And the combo of the three actually killed her and she died. So she died from an overdose of those three drugs. But illicit drugs, there's not a safe dose to consume of illicit drugs. What's happening inside your body is being poisoned. A lot of these kids, they just don't even know what they're getting. Even adults. There's a lot of adults, they don't know what they're consuming. It's
h-
really sad.
how has this affected your family? You said you had two other kids. Like, how have they struggled with the loss of their brother? Or are they kind of all on board with this? Or maybe if you could talk
Um,
about like the
well,
family.
yeah, my daughter was 2.5 years older than her brother, and they were really close. And I was so messed up in my grief that I really wasn't looking at hers. And I remember it was like 6.5, 7 months after my son had passed away, and my daughter was over. It was summertime. We were sitting on the front porch talking, and I didn't even know she had quit her job. I had no idea. She quit her job after her brother died and gained like 40 pounds. because that's what she did. That's how, she wasn't functioning, but I didn't realize what was going on with her because I was too messed up. I mean, and I still wanted to die back then, even though I had two living children. I would have been okay with death. Now, I wasn't going to take my own life, but if I ran off a bridge by accident, I wasn't going to be crying the blues about it. So yeah, it really affected my daughter really, really hard.
Well,
My
the
other
grief
son,
is brutal. Like, and that's again one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is to when you lose a child, most of the time it's completely unexpected and you don't have any place to turn to what have other people been through. You just kind of go on day to day, and there are so many challenges internally dealing with that grief that it's hard to care for the people around you.
yeah, I don't think I did a great job caring for anyone around me because I went to work every day. My son died on a Saturday. We had the funeral the following Saturday, and that Monday I was back at work. I had bills to pay, but honestly, I look back on it because I'm always like, God, I talk to God like I can't believe it's my own company. I used to have a partner, but it's just me now. But I always wondered, why is this my job? Like I'm just cleaning houses. But after my son passed away, after some time after he passed, I feel like God had me doing this for a reason because I think I would have been fired. I don't think I would have been able to work. I'm single, I'm not married. So I think I would have lost my house if I had another job, like if I worked in a hospital or if I worked around people at all. I don't think I would have been able to do it. My heart breaks for all those people that lose a child and have to go back to work, like working with other people. I don't know. I was alone every day. So if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs and cry at work, which I did all the time, I was able to do that. So now I thank God for my job because I was able to get through that. And I know plenty of bereaved moms that have either gotten fired or just didn't go back to work. They're on disability. A lot of people, death of a child is debilitating, you
Yes.
know? And that's why I'm saying without running to the cross, I don't know where I'd be because even running to God with this, it's so hard. Like, I dreaded being on your show. I really did. I didn't want to be on this podcast because we weren't really talking about China and fentanyl. We were more talking and focusing on the grief part of it and like my story, and I don't like talking about that often. It like brings it all, it's just hard. It's still difficult 6.5 years later. It's
I
not
kind of did
fun.
what you did when you looked at like what is not being addressed with the loss of a child. Like I saw a lot of podcasts around and things dealing with talking about their kids, but not really addressing the grief. And that's what a lot of people ask us. How do you deal with that over time? For us, we've really tried to take you still feel the hurt every day, but try to take these are the really good things about my son, and you celebrate him at like it was Father's Day, yesterday, or like on his birthday, or you talk about good things about him and try to remember those positives. But it's very challenging when you have to go back and think about that grief because it's so painful. And I know you've changed your grief to this mission that seems to drive you every day to not have another parent have to go through what you're going through.
Yeah, pain to purpose. I really think it can save people from just, and especially with illicit fentanyl. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy to turn your pain into purpose, but there's so much awareness we can do. Like and I try to talk to some of these moms because some of them just can't do anything. And I'm like, nothing is too little. If all you can do is wear a fentanyl awareness t shirt, wear it. I wore one. I'm telling you, this was like 2 years ago. I was in my local dollar store and I had a fentanyl awareness shirt on. And it was a long line that day. And there was a lady in the line, and she's pointing at me and she's like, I like your shirt. And I just looked at her. I said, Did you lose someone? She said, Yeah, my kid. And you ready? Four people in the line. Four. I'm like, this
Sad.
is insane. Like, how, when I'm saying we're losing 100,000 people a year, we're losing 100,000 people a year. It's astronomical. It's mind boggling to me still. After 6.5 years, I look at all the people that have died since my son has died, and I just think it's complete insanity. And knowing that our government has completely failed us, it gives us a lot to fight about.
When you bring that up about like the four people in line that had lost children to that, when you went through this, did you feel very alone and isolated? Because that's one of the things that seems like loss of a child, unless people are reaching out to you. And again, for us, we had a very big support system, but you do feel very much alone. And, which makes it even harder to go through the grief, like, 'cause there's just nobody to share it with.
You want to hear something crazy? So I have this group, we got 36,000 members, and I still feel alone. When it comes to the grief, and why is that? It's like I know so many moms and dads, and I still sometimes feel so alone. It's, you know, no one's going to grieve my son like I grieve my son. Same for you.
Yep.
And and everybody, like, your grief is your grief. I say I walk hand in hand with grief. It's never going anywhere. Like, my son is not coming back. So it's just, what do they say? All the love with nowhere to go.
Yeah. And, this grief with losing a child, they say is the most enduring grief you could ever have. It's very different than losing a parent or a sibling. Losing a child, it's just, as you said before, it can be debilitating, can create financial runs relationships, marriages, family dynamics. And again, that's kind of what we're trying to explore through people that have gone through it, that are willing to kind of discuss it, that you're not alone with it. But how do you rely on people, to the places that you can go to even talk about it? Or, faith in God, that for us, that was, a key for us, because we know at some point we will see my son again, but it doesn't change the grief you have on a daily
Yep.
basis.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like I'm definitely blessed. The one Bible verse, beauty for ashes. Oh my gosh. That one, I would fight with God with that one. Nope. What do you mean? Nope. Don't want to hear it. But, after time, I tell people, with it never gets better, but it gets different. I
Yeah.
will never tell another bereaved parent it gets better. How that just kind of ticks me off. Like, how in the world is it going to get better that my kid is dead? But it gets different.
You manage the
And
grief differently.
yeah, it's like in the beginning, you're constantly drowning. The tidal waves are, they keep crashing. Now it's like, I can see the tidal wave coming. I can see that coming now. I mean, I'm at 6.5 years. And, I feel I do have a lot of beauty for ashes. Like, I know so many people. It's so sad and it breaks my heart. But I know if I need to pick up the phone, I have people to call. So I would tell anybody that has lost a child, if they're sitting alone and they haven't done anything, they have to find grief support or get on social media, because I'm sure there's those special groups if you've lost a child to cancer, that
Yep.
I'm sure they're out there. They have a group for everything. You That's my best advice. They have to connect. It's too much to bear on your own. You
Yep.
need to connect with other families that lost a child. You have to. I mean, even with running to the cross, I feel like you have to have that connection with other people that understand what you're going through.
Yeah, because you help them, they help you. There's
Yep.
just, and it's something that people can say that have not lost a child. Oh, I know what you're going through. They don't.
No, they don't.
But people who have lost a child, you can certainly relate to the emotion of that grief. It just never will go away. But for us, we've just learned to manage it differently, trying to take the grief and turn it into celebrations of his life
Yeah.
rather than all of our loss. But
In this podcast, which is for you, like that is a way to, paint a purpose,
it
which
was
I think
very
is beautiful.
interesting. Like when I started doing this, you really think of, I'm closer to retirement. So I'm thinking, what do I want to do next with my life? And you start praying and thinking about these things. And like so many people would ask us, like, how do you manage that grief? And it's like, you'll never get rid of that grief. But, here's some things we've learned. Here's people that have spoken to our lives or support us sometimes when they do things for you that just like, hey, I know you might be struggling. This is his birthday coming up or something like that. And they kind of wrap you in their arms with love and like, hey, how do we help you through it? And so part of what I'm doing this podcast, it's interviewing people that have lost kids that can relate to others, but also some of the support people that come and they're very special, even if it's just for a season that were there for you. So those are
Yeah.
some of the additional people that we're having the discussions with.
Nice. I mean, I think a church family is definitely good. And right now, I don't even have one because, yeah, I stopped going to the one. But so that's another thing. But that's something I need to lean more into because I do feel like I need that. And now I feel like I'm kind of getting in a funk. Like, what does God want me to do? Like, I have this nonprofit, but am I going to keep having an event every year in DC? Like, after October, I'm going to be in another big praying season, I think, because, I just don't know. And I don't know.
Yeah. I really appreciate you doing this interview. I know it can be very emotional having to talk back through that part of the loss. So I do really appreciate you sharing your story.
You're welcome.